grateful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty, above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
The United States of America is the most musical nation the world has ever known. American music reaches every country and corner of the globe, and it is heard by an estimated 1 out of every 5 human beings every day. America produces nearly 3 times as much music as its nearest national competitor, and total music revenue is greater than that of the next 3 highest nations combined. The United States has more professional musicians than any other nation. Just over 1/2 of all American households have 1 or more members who play a musical instrument. More than half of all Americans intentionally listen to 1 or more songs every day, and the average American hears over 30 hours of music every week, compared to a world average of 18. For many, if not most Americans, music is not just part of life. Music is life, and life without music is no life at all.
God shed His grace on me and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea, from sea to shining sea, from sea to shining sea.
The story of American music is so grand and vast that no one could ever know it all, or in a single lifetime tell it. But throughout the story of American music, 4 themes have determined the plot, and war has repeatedly driven it forwards.
Continentals, take care. Halt! Halt! Close the column. Pick ready. Fire! Time and load. Pick ready. Fire!
The American nation and American music were born in war. For 8 years, from 1775 until 1783, 13 of Great Britain's North American colonies fought for their independence from the mother country, and upon winning it, enshrined the principles for which they fought: individual freedom, representative government, and a state with limited power, into the supreme law of the land, the Constitution of the United States. When citizens demanded a more specific listing and protection of their liberties and freedom, 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, were added. The first of these amendments specifically prohibited the making of any law abridging a citizen's freedom of speech, a freedom intended and subsequently interpreted to protect all forms of human expression. From that moment on, the first theme of American music was in place: the freedom to create and express oneself without censorship and government control.
Farewell, my lads, I must away, for here I can no longer stay. The Shamrock sails at break of day, bound for America. They say there's work for one and all, which we don't have in Donegal. And my boys, you know, by the great St. Ruth, I've told to you the truth. But if ever again I reach this land, you will find me a much better man, and I hope it will be with a Fenian band. Now poor Pat must emigrate.
The people and the land are one, and music is their voice. The United States is the third largest country in the world, and the most geographically and culturally complex. The American nation was created and shaped generation from generation by immigrants. During the colonial period, migrants primarily came from northwestern Europe, with a significant minority of involuntary migrants, slaves, from Africa and the Caribbean. Through the 19th and into the early 20th century, immigration expanded to include Eastern and Southeastern Europe, Russia, Canada, Mexico, and China. Following World War II, the United States became the destination of migrants from almost every nation on Earth. Each and every generation of new arrivals brought their own culture and traditions with them, and together they have written the second theme of American music: diversity. There is a cherished simile in American history that likens the nation to a melting pot, into which were poured immigrants, and out of which came a homogeneous American people. The reality, however, is that historically, America has been more a stew pot of separate ingredients jumbled together. Immigrants tended to gravitate to certain regions and settle in communities of their own kind, creating an American cultural and musical landscape that was diverse, but defined by distinct local and regional boundaries. Thus, the original music of America was music from someplace else, predominantly from Northwest and Central Europe. With each passing decade, Americans adapted, improvised, and rearranged their musical legacy. Early America was a musical land, but a unique American music did not yet truly exist. Until, that is, there came a war.
The years creep slowly by, Lorena. The snow is on the grass again. The sun's low down the sky, Lorena. The frost gleams where the flowers have been. But the heart throbs on as warmly now as when the summer days were nigh. Oh, the sun can never dip so low, but down affection's cloudless sky.
The American Civil War is the bloodiest war in American history, and its sweeping social, political, and cultural effects dramatically and forever changed the nation. From 1861 to 1865, Millions of Americans from every state and territory were uprooted by war and set into motion. And from 1865 to 1870, millions more by its aftermath. The armies of the American Civil War were drawn from every corner of the nation. They were the first literate armies in history, and they were also the most musical. Many men brought their own musical instruments with them, and nearly every unit of any size had its own talented musicians, ensemble, or band. North and South adopted songs as their banners and enshrined them into American history and culture. Civilian songwriters on both sides harnessed music to the cause, and American publishers and printers, equipped with the latest mechanical printing presses, flooded American homes with music. The power of music was illustrated by the equal popularity of many songs with both sides. And soldiers of both sides grew teary-eyed with the most popular song of the Civil War, Lorena. Music was inseparable from the Civil War, and everywhere tunes, songs, styles, and musical traditions, once confined to a specific place or a particular people, broke free of their borders, found new audiences, and began to melt and mix amidst the fires of war, creating something new, an emerging American musical style and sound.
To dust beneath the sun, but there up there 'tis hard to harm. I'll be so glad when the sun goes down.
When the sun goes down.
I'll be so glad when the sun goes down.
When the sun goes down.
I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down.
But I wanna lie down.
I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down.
But I wanna lie down.
I wanna lie down, baby. I wanna lie down.
But I wanna lie down.
I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down.
But I wanna lie down.
Oh, what got the matter, baby?
Of all the people set into motion by the Civil War and all the changes the war brought to American music, none had a more lasting and significant influence than the freeing of the slaves.
Went down to the river Jordan, where John baptized 3. When I walked the devil in hell, says Johnny baptized me. I say, roll, Jordan, roll. Oh, now roll, Jordan, roll. My soul will rise in heaven, Lord, for the year Jordan roll. Well, some say John.
The Confederacy's slaves, some 4 million, possessed a rich and unique musical heritage, one incorporating African and Caribbean influences, melded with the regional musical styles of the American South, and heavily influenced by Christian hymns and biblical stories. Their preferred instruments were often handcrafted and basic, favoring percussion and simple woodwind and string instruments, the most significant of which was the banjo, which they introduced to America. The music of the slaves, however, was predominantly vocal and adapted to the kinds of labor they performed. chants with numerous choruses and call and response exchanges between groups, kept time and coordinated and choreographed complex and repetitive tasks. As free men and women, the doors of education opened to them, if with limits and slowly. Students learned to read and write music, and musicians learned its forms, conventions, and techniques. Choirs became a fixture of black churches, and traveling choruses toured the nation. Bands emerged, and a cadre of professional musicians grew steadily. By the end of the 19th century, African American musicians were driving the development of two popular musical forms, the blues and ragtime, and from them would soon create America's truly unique musical genre, jazz.
John Henry, he could hammer, he could whistle, he could sing. Went to the mountain early in the morning just to hear his hammer ring. Lord, Lord, just to hear his hammer ring. Just to hear his hammer ring. Lord, Lord, just to hear his hammer ring. When John Henry was a little baby, sitting on his daddy's knee, picked up a hammer and a little piece of steel, said, hammer be the death of me, Lord God, yes, hammer be the death of me. Yes, hammer be the death of me, Lord, Lord, yes, hammer be the death of me. Well, John Henry's family needed money.
The return of peace to the United States ushered in an era of rapid westward expansion, urban growth, economic development, and technological advancement. American railroads connected the Atlantic and Pacific and spread across the vast space in between, opening highways of steel over which millions of settlers moved west, and food and raw materials east, feeding America's burgeoning cities and industrial centers. A flood of innovation and invention flowed from American laboratories and workshops, including the foundational technologies of our modern world: electric power, electric lighting, and the telephone. As a new century grew closer on the horizon, two powerful new themes were at work, transforming both the nation and American music: technology and commercialization.
Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
With those words came the invention that would bring music to the masses, and in so doing, change the nation and then the world. Invented in 1877 by Thomas Edison, the phonograph gave man the ability to record and recreate sound. The phonograph focused sound waves through a funnel, where the changes in air pressure moved a flexible diaphragm connected to a stylus. The moving stylus cut a groove into the surface of a revolving cylinder of metal foil or wax. When placed in the groove and the cylinder turned, a playback stylus moved the diaphragm, reproducing the sound wave. By 1900, the phonograph was widely available and relatively affordable. Record cylinders gave way to record discs, which were easier to store and could hold a longer groove. From record discs came the name for an entirely new field of human endeavor and knowledge: discography, the collection and study of recorded sound, and in particular, music. By 1920, the standard commercial record disc was 10 inches in diameter and designed to be played at 78 revolutions per minute. The 78 dominated the recording industry until the late 1940s, and its limit of about 3 minutes of playtime per side imposed a powerful and lasting legacy on popular music. Well before World War II, the 3-minute song was the industry standard. And even today, 100 years and several technological revolutions later, the average length of a popular song is 3.5 minutes. Coin-operated record players, or jukeboxes, invented in the 1890s, were commonplace by the 1920s. And more than any other technological innovation, they shaped both the rise of the music industry and the evolution of popular music. By World War II, there were over 400,000 jukeboxes in the United States, and their voracious appetite for new and replacement records accounted for 3 out of every 4 albums sold. Since the mid-19th century, dancing had grown steadily in popularity as a form of social gathering, entertainment, and recreation, and every American city of decent size had several dance halls and clubs. Jukeboxes now bypassed the need for a band and turned any place with open floor space into a dance hall. The result was the simultaneous explosion in the popularity of jazz music and wave after wave of dance crazes. The 1920s and 1930s were the decades of dance in America, and dance drove the evolution of popular music. Jukeboxes also imposed a form of Darwinian selection upon American popular music. Jukeboxes contained mechanical counters, which kept track of how many times each record was played. The more a record was played, the more money it made, and the sooner it needed to be replaced. Furthermore, the numbers were collected and reported, and in 1936, the popular entertainment magazine The Billboard began keeping a weekly chart of the most played records. Climbing the charts became both a new phrase in the lexicon of American English, as well as the holy grail for recording musicians. Popularity and profit, in turn, were the priority and criteria of the recording industry, and inspired imitation and adaptation. Motion pictures, movies, invented in the 1890s, rapidly developed into a thriving industry in Europe and the United States. By 1910, feature films of an hour or more were common, but were silent, lacking an integral soundtrack. Accompanying scores were often written for a film and played live in the theater by pianists, organists, ensembles, and even entire orchestras. In the 1920s, rapid advances in technology led to the development of the electronic microphone and sound system, revolutionizing both the recording and movie industries. Now it became possible to unite a soundtrack with film, and in 1927, the first feature-length talking motion picture, fittingly The Jazz Singer, starring Al Jolson, marked the birth of the modern motion picture. And by the 1930s, the film industry and American music were inseparable.
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet. Wait a minute, I tell you. You ain't heard nothing.
The same advances in electronics, which revolutionized the record and film industries, also enabled the phenomenal rise of commercial radio broadcasting. The first commercial U.S. radio station went on the air in 1920. By 1940, 84% of all U.S. households had at least one radio. While the Great Depression ravaged America's economy in the 1930s, America's entertainment industry grew steadily. Large corporations bought up independent recording labels, film studios, and radio stations, extending their control over most of America's entertainment and media. By World War II, 3 broadcast networks dominated radio, with their programs spanning coast to coast. 4 major labels produced most of America's recorded music, and 5 movie studios produced over 90% of all the films being made on Earth. Nearly every American listened to the radio every day, and during World War II, 2 out of every 3 Americans would go to a movie theater at least once a week, the highest national attendance rate in the history of film. By 1940, the recording industry, radio, and film were interconnected in a complex and symbiotic commercial relationship. From the recording booth, radio studio, and movie soundstage, music rolled out across the land, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And America the Beautiful was now America the Musical. By the eve of World War II, 4 themes: freedom, diversity, technology, and commercialization had made America the most musical nation on earth. The story of American music now stood upon the threshold of a climactic chapter, a chapter in which both America and its music would be transformed by the greatest war in the history of man, and together they would transform the world. And this is where our story truly begins.
beautiful, for heroes proved in liberating strife. Who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, make God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and ever again divine. And you know, when I was in school, we used to sing it something like this. Listen here. Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties, above the fruited plain. But now wait a minute, I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed his grace on thee. He crowned our good. Yes, he did. Heavy brotherhood from sea to shining sea. You know, I wish I had somebody to help me sing this. America, I love you, America. You see, my God, he done shed his grace on thee. You ought to love him for it, 'cause he crowned my good. He told me he would. Every brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh Lord, I thank you, Lord.